us. I want us to get straight into our conversation here in studio. I have, starting from my extreme right, I'll start from my extreme right, Ken Ambani, who's a political analyst, not a new face here on the show. Thank you very much, Ken, for coming. We also have Dr. Robert Kagiri, who's a director at the Africa Policy Institute. Thank you for your time, Dr. All right, so this morning we're asking our viewers if they think that the fresh presidential election will be free and fair, if all these demands that have been brought forward by NASA will be met. I don't know what you can say about that before we get into deeper details of everything that he's demanding.
Well, before we get into greater detail,
right,
I think that we need to take into account that the comprehensive ruling is coming out, I think, by next Friday.
Yes.
And some of the issues that have been raised by the NASA side will probably also be reflected on the comprehensive decision, which IBC has said they are also awaiting, so that they can streamline themselves. So I think we might be a little jumping the gun by dwelling too much on the issues raised by NASA as of now. IBC has also tried to get the two parties together, and I believe if they can merge what the court ruling will come up with in terms of comprehensive ruling and engage the two parties, we shall ensure that we do have a free, fair and transparent election come October 17th.
All right.
Yes.
And Ken, talking about that free and fair election come October 17th, what should we as a country be relying on? Is it the demands that are being brought forward by NASA, or is it that comprehensive, detailed Supreme Court ruling that should inform what really should happen within the commission? Also, just considering that IBC should be an independent commission that has independence to make decisions on what they think is right, even with this fresh election that's coming up.
Thank you, Betty, for that question. First and foremost, I want to say that IBC is giving NASA fodder to pound them. One, most of the issues that NASA are raising as their demands have not come from NASA. They are actually issues that have been raised within the inner circles of IEBC. One, why are we going for fresh elections? It is because IBC failed flat on its mandate. If they had delivered a free and fair elections, we would not be where we are. And the most important thing for IBC to do now is to clean its house.
Isn't it doing so? But it seems as much as it's doing so, there's so many attacks. And
in their quest to clean the house, they are muddying the waters more and more. Because if they have been indicted and people have been mentioned, names have been mentioned, there is nothing that is being done to make Kenyans see that they are doing something, because it is all about perception. The court said the elections were not free and fair. So what should happen basically is for IBC as a commission to have a self-introspection and say, well, these are the issues that were raised. Where did we go wrong? How are we cleaning this? And they should actually engage maybe communication experts to make them now begin to generate that image that will place them in positive light in the Kenyan public. But as long as they continue picking cues from politicians, they'll be pounded.
But is it really about generating, an image that they're working together, or is it really dealing with the situations and the issues that were raised, especially to do with that memo that came out last week?
Thank you. Because one, if you look at the issues that were raised, one of them was you pussyfooting on issues that are true to the Kenyan public. This thing was done in the wrong way. And some of the fellows who are supposed to be questioned are still the fellows who are running the show. So what do you expect Kenyans who are thinking of a free, fair, and credible election, seeing that these are the fellows who are going to be refereeing, be officiating? There are people who are still going to procure. We are talking of Al Ghurair. Al Ghurair issue was brought to court, and these fellows from NASA said, we don't want these fellows to be used to print the ballot papers. They went ahead and printed the ballot papers. The ballot papers led us to a botched presidential election. Again, IBC is telling these fellows, okay, because we have a contract for 2 years with these guys, we are still going to give them.
All right.
You see, it is not helping the situation.
All right. And we'll be coming to that shortly. But, Dr. I want us to talk about these people who have been mentioned. On one hand, I mean, if you listen to Jubilee, they have a problem with Chebukati. If you listen to NASA, they have a problem with Chiloba. So where does it really put this commission at, even as they try to, line up? We've seen Chebukati coming and saying, we have this team that's going to be managing this election with the help of Chiloba, who NASA has, a serious problem with. So what really would be the way forward with this, this quagmire that IBC finds itself in?
Well, it's understandable that the Jubilee side has a problem with Chibukuti because they do believe they won the election, and the incompetence or mishandling of the election by the IEBC as outlined by the Supreme Court is what lost them the election. So they do have a beef with the chairman being the one where the buck stops. On the other hand, NASA have a problem with the chief executive because they feel that he meddled with the election and in the process ensured that they did not win what they expect was their win. So this quibbling is going on. But I return to what I said. I think the comprehensive ruling will be able to point fingers. Well, Ken spoke about some indictments. Nobody has been indicted yet. But perhaps some of the dockets that they hold have been pointed out as having had some mishandling. So there's this perception that those people should not be able to handle those dockets yet again. But we have not reached that stage. The ruling by the Supreme Court was that the IBC should conduct an election within 60 days based on the Constitution of Kenya and their own electoral laws. So they are supposed to follow their own rules and regulations that they had set forth. If it comes to issues to do with printing, when I was following the Supreme Court ruling, what the issues that were brought up by the lawyers had more to do with was the printing, were the forms having the features that were supposed to have been there. And in this case, one of the lawyers, Paul Muite, argued that the ABC had an abundance of caution and went ahead over and above the regulations they said to set up security features. So as long as the IBC adheres to its own rules and regulations and the electoral laws and stays within the confines of the Constitution, I expect that the next round of election, especially if we consider that it will only be one ballot rather than six, will be handled well, and we shall have a clear winner without any ambiguity going forward.
Ken, he says that that nobody has already been indicted. The Supreme Court ruling is yet to come, the detailed one. Then really we'll know who to point fingers at.
One thing is that, Betty, when you're dealing with issues, the buck stops with the fellows administering this thing. One, Chiloba says he's as clean as Caesar's wife. However, the election was bungled, was botched, and therefore it was declared null and void. Chebukati, on his part, says, now that we have been given a chance to conduct the elections afresh, I'm taking charge. Remember, IBC as a commission is one of those commissions that are special in a kind because the chair has equal powers as the CEO. He can usurp the responsibilities of a CEO. And I think at this time, what Chiloba is probably, or what Chebukati has failed to do, is to take that responsibility and run the show. Because in such a case, with the letter that he issued Chiloba to respond to the issues he raised, he can retire him in public interest. It has been done in government, and it is standard procedure. So I think Chebukati must be man enough to stand his ground because the buck stops with him. Number two, the court demanded of IEBC to open the servers. And from what we gathered, they played around telling us some fellows were still asleep in Europe. And as long as they don't open up or they don't give us information, people will still continue to hold them in contempt, in speculation.
Right.
And these are some of the issues that they must come out to address for the Kenyan population to begin seeing them in the positive direction and gravitating towards giving us a free and fair election. Failure to do that, they'll always be held in suspicion. And this is what Raila keeps on harping on, because he said, look, and if I had right, when I watched the press conference that was held in Naivasha, Chebukati invited both parties, NASA and Jubilee, to the IEBC offices at 11 o'clock. The first fellows to arrive there was the NASA team. And they waited for some time, and as we heard from Raila, he alleged that when they got there, the chairman did not meet them. Instead, they sent a junior officer to meet them while they waited, because he wanted to meet both parties, only for them to be given an 8-page document that raised the issues that they were going to discuss in that meeting.
Right.
Yeah? And now you begin to see that this guy tells us, oh, this guy will not take part in this. I have appointed a project. After a short while, we have reconciled. We are now working as a team. This kind of facade they are putting up now leaves the populace holding them in contempt or holding them in suspicion, because they are not they are not firm on what they are telling the country.
The populace.
Yes.
All right, so you're saying it feels cosmetic.
Yeah,
whatever
it's so
it
cosmetic.
Is
Yeah, it's a facade.
It's a facade. We'll continue the conversation in a few moments, but we have to take a short commercial break. Remember that we're putting to focus the demands that have been put forward by NASA, and we'll continue to list them. Of course, one of them is that Ezra Chiloba, who's a CEO, should step aside. They've also talked about appointment of new returning officers across the 290 constituencies, printing of ballot papers by another firm, and also one of the other demands is that the servers must be open for them to have the read-only access, as was ordered by the Supreme Court. So those are just some of the demands that NASA has. We're asking you if you feel or if you think that there's going to be a fresh election if those demands are actually met. Tell us what you think. Hashtag is News Center, or you can tweet me at Betty M. Callum. All right, so let's take that break. We're coming back in a few minutes to continue with our discussion.